want to be better with money, but dread the math? I get it. That's why this show is not focused on math, the markets, meme stocks, or even economic predictions. It is focused on how money fits into your daily life, from having healthy money conversations to caring for an aging parent. I'm Karen Coyne, certified financial planner professional and your host of Money Without Math. Join us for conversations that are practical, sometimes philosophical, and always fresh. Learn more about me at raymondjames.com/clarity, and be sure to subscribe. If you've been listening to the show for a while now, you know that the general MO is that money is more than just math. And it's, in fact, very deeply personal. A lot of the most challenging and tough considerations that come along with money are not the ones that are distinctly financial, but they're deeply personal and psychological. Our guest today bridges those two worlds in her work every day between personal and finance. And so it's my pleasure to welcome Christine Benz. She's the Director of Personal Finance and Retirement Planning for Morningstar, which, if that name sounds familiar, if you're not already familiar with the name, that's the company that's behind those mutual fund ratings. They're known for their research that they do for stocks and mutual funds and ETFs and so much more. She's an author, most recently, of How to Retire, 20 Lessons for a Happy, Successful, and Wealthy Retirement. And lastly, she's a frequent speaker and co-host of the Morningstar podcast, The Long View. Welcome, Christine.
Karen, thank you so much for having me. It's great to spend time with you.
Thank you for joining. I've been following you for some time, and of course now on social media. It's great to stay connected and hear from you. And I have to say, one of the things I really love about your voice is that it's practical, but in a way that's not preachy or shamey. It's very, very personal and accessible, and I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. That's exactly what I'm going for in my work. So it's really lovely to hear someone say that seems to be resonating. I appreciate it.
Great. Yes. Financial services, I feel like, has come a long way. You've been at Morningstar for over 30 years. I've been in this business for about 25 years. And I do feel like it's come a long way since I started. But I love that I'm seeing and hearing more of this kind of accessible, practical voice from our younger generations as well that are kind of coming in behind us.
Well, me too. It was all about investment selection when I started, and that was sort of my entry point into the financial world, was helping people pick mutual funds. And then, when I picked my head up, I realized how much more there was to all of this. And so it's fun that it is getting much more holistic. And I think that's a healthy direction for the industry.
Yes. I know that you started your career with Morningstar as a liberal arts graduate. Like myself, you came to the industry with maybe somewhat of a mismatched background at the time, but you worked as a copy editor and then, worked your way to a fund analyst and then so much more. But so in your work for Morningstar, I imagine that you've largely been speaking to the do-it-yourself investor. Whereas in my career, I've worked clearly with folks who, want to hire someone to help them with their money. Over the years, have your views changed about the two worlds, about DIY versus, the value of hiring an advisor? What are your thoughts there?
They have evolved a little bit, Karen. I think I was on Team DIY earlier in my career, mainly because of what I said before, that I think I was focused on investment portfolios. And to be candid, I don't think that putting together an investment portfolio has to be rocket science. There are lots of good model portfolios out there that people can use. But really, that is such a small component of whether someone succeeds or fails in their financial goals. Importantly, they need to be able to stick to that portfolio through various market conditions. They need to articulate their goals and prioritize their goals because they probably have more things they want to achieve with their money than they reasonably can. So they need someone to help them determine how to allocate their resources. They need to factor in insurance considerations, healthcare considerations. It's just much broader than putting together an investment portfolio. If that were the only job at hand, I would say, yeah, go ahead and DIY it. And indeed, some people can do all of the things that they need to do to have a healthy financial plan. I'm part of the Bogleheads community, which is kind of an active DIY type mindset. But that's a very specific type of individual. Most people do not have the time or inclination to do a good job with all of the aspects of creating a financial plan, which is why I think that in a lot of situations, a financial advisor, a financial planner is a really smart allocation of resources for people. And that's especially true in the decumulation phase as people get closer to their retirement dates. They're needing to figure out the adequacy of what they've managed to save. They're needing to figure out how to position that portfolio to support them once they begin taking cash flows from that portfolio. So there are just many different decisions that have to happen at that life stage. And that's where I think getting another set of eyes on the plan is absolutely mission critical. And it needn't be that you're hiring someone on an ongoing basis necessarily, but just, maybe that point in time investment recommendation or sort of episodic investment advice that you're paying for on an hourly or a per engagement basis. To me, that can really be money well spent at that life stage.
Yeah, and I think that's another something else that I appreciate about the voice that you share, in your work is that it's not all one or the other, where it's like you have to DIY or you're crazy, or you have to work with an advisor or you're crazy. It's, there's no one size fits all here. There are definitely, benefits to both, but subjectively or selfishly, or what's the word that I want, biased. I'm of course a little bit biased that when we get to our retirement decumulation years, it is helpful to have another set of eyes and ears, like you said.
Right. And I always say that, my husband and I have a financial planner because as I think well trained as an investor as I am, we just want to have another receptacle for our assets about what we have, where we hold it, and also a little bit of, feedback, kind of counterpoints on, oh, have you thought about this? Have you thought about rebalancing into fixed income as you're getting older? All of those pieces of feedback have been tremendously useful to us. So even people who perceive themselves as being pretty savvy about their financial plans, I think might benefit from having, just another set of eyes on their plan and a receptacle for all of their information.
The receptacle is a big one. I
It is.
agree. And we definitely see a lot more of that as we're all getting a little bit older every
Right,
year.
right. Exactly. I love that there is someone who, if something happened to my husband and me at the same time or whatever, there's someone our family could turn to and say, what do they have? What's going on with them? And she would know all of the details, which to me seems incredibly helpful.
Yeah, fantastic. I love to hear that. Love to hear that. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about today is, your take on the FIRE movement, which is the Financial Independence Retire Early. This is something that has been, widely talked about in the financial services community. And yeah, would just love to hear kind of like your take, what we can learn from it, the good, bad, and maybe what we might want to leave behind.
Definitely. I will admit I was kind of a fire skeptic, Karen, when I first heard about the movement. I don't know, it's probably 10 or more years ago. Someone mentioned Mr. Money Mustache to me at a conference. And the reason I was skeptical is well, twofold. One is that I've loved my work, and my work has been really an important source of satisfaction and joy and friendships for me. So the thought of like thinking of work as kind of this slog that I've just got to get through so that I can retire and like actually enjoy my life, that's just not how I've lived. And I would urge people, if they have a job that's making them so unhappy, figure something else out, because it
Mm.
really truly does not have to be that way. Your job is not just about money. So that was my main sort of um, subjective or softer objection. And then on a financial from a financial standpoint, I worry, and I still worry a little bit about this, that some of the research that we have around traditional length retirement, a 25 or 30-year period or longer, it hasn't really been tested over a very long time horizon, a 40
Mm.
or 50-year time horizon. We just don't have the robust research that we have for normal duration retirement. So that's another thing that still makes me a little nervous, because I hear a lot of FIRE proponents say, oh yeah, just do 4% and you'll be fine. And I'm like, well, yikes. It doesn't necessarily seem sound to me over that very long time horizon. I would rather people, plan to be flexible with their retirement spending if they are planning to retire that early. But I will say I've evolved as I've gotten to know more participants in the FIRE community. And I recently did a kind of a retreat with some FIRE people in Spain back in the spring, and was so impressed by the community, but also the thoughtfulness with which these people have approached not just their financial plans, but their lives,
Mm.
that they are prizing and prioritizing what I call their time on earth allocations. So we spend a lot of time talking about investment allocations and investment portfolios, but they really put a premium on, I only get one life. I
Mm.
don't know how long it will be, and I'm going to make sure that I have all of the experiences and adventures that I possibly can. And I'm not necessarily going to be weighed down by work. So I love that mindset. I love the idea of people, kind of leaning out in paid work and then maybe leaning in at other points in their lives. I think that's probably a healthier model,
Mm.
where retirement's a little more of a glide path, or maybe you're retiring earlier and then getting back into it at some later date. I think it needs to be more fluid than this whole thing of everybody work till 65 or 67 and then it's just this hard stop. People should probably think about working longer, not just for financial reasons, but because work is good for us.
Mm.
Um, but they should also be willing to maybe take breaks earlier in their careers when they need a break, when they have
Right.
young kids or whatever the case might be.
Right. I agree completely. I'm curious to hear how many people you speak with who failed their early retirement, because we know people, and I say failed, I take that from Lee Iacocca. I don't know if you remember his story about, him failing retirement because he thought it was going to be um, he miscalculated how much of it was missing connections to work and purpose, and all those things that were so vital, as you just mentioned, all those years. And of course, he had plenty of money. That wasn't the problem. But he retired and found himself to be very miserable. And of course, we've seen this with many people over the years. And I just think about, gosh, if you've had a long career and then let's say you're 65-ish, you retire and realize after a couple weeks of golfing or trips that, okay, now what? Well, how do you manage that when you're in your 30s and you've got decades ahead of you to build some pattern and purpose into your life? So I'm curious if you've heard from folks who kind of, did the thing and then went, oopsies. This
Well,
might not
yes, I
be, I
think
may have bitten off more than I expected.
I think that's a phenomenon. I've frankly seen it less among fire people. Most of the fire people I know are really content, but most of them are doing some type of work, even if it's not paid work. It
Okay.
might be blogging or volunteering in a financial education charity. Most of the fire people I know are just not kicking back and, vacationing. They're really staying busy. But among older adults, there definitely is a trend toward people unretiring, where they retire and maybe it wasn't what they thought it would be, and maybe they've just found that they're not getting enough fulfillment from their retirement life. So they're heading back into the workforce in some fashion. And I do think that, kind of moving in and out is a healthier model if we can just kind of get our minds around what that might be like, where maybe we're pulling back for a couple of years when we need to help care for our elderly parents or whatever the case might be, and then getting back in after that. Of course, that can be easier said than done, but I would like the whole division between working in retirement to be more fluid than many people construe it today.
I agree. And there's so many factors at play there. I mean, between employers and then also, as individuals coming to terms with, maybe pivoting from a career that's very ambitious, or high income earning to, there's just a lot of pivots,
Right.
and tough questions and considerations. But when I think about, and especially in certain fields like say CPAs and public accounting, um, you have all these folks that are going to retire, and we know that there's not an equal number of new folks coming into the field. And that's where I just think it's ripe for some kind of, phase out and fluidity, as you mentioned, where, maybe we have some folks who still are working remotely a couple of days a week. We know that this newer generation in general, they don't want to work those crazy hours, especially during tax season. So where can we
Right.
meet in the middle? It just seems like the opportunity and the timing is right for a shift like that.
Absolutely. And one of my main points that I make about this book is um, people should start strategizing at, say, age 50, I think, so that the job that they're doing is as agreeable to them as it possibly can be. And I always say, it's up to individuals to decide whether to do this in stealth mode, where you're not really communicating to your employer about your thinking, or whether you are actively having a conversation with them about, here's what I want to do, here's what I don't enjoy doing anymore. I leave it to all of your listeners, all of your viewers to decide that. But I love the idea of really thinking about your work life and the complexion of your work, and trying to pull forward those things that you enjoy and trying to back burner some of the things you don't enjoy as much. And inevitably, your employer is going to want you to keep doing some things that you don't love. Inevitably, we get good at some things that we don't love, and there's no one else to step into our shoes. But ideally, if you could put a little bit of strategy into this, starting at age 50, or maybe even before, where you
Mhm.
are crafting a job and getting yourself into a job that you're going to want to continue doing longer. To me, that's the best way to approach it. And then maybe, as sort of you move into your 60s, maybe you're pulling back from that 40 hours a week, because 40 hours is a long time to give to anything. But you're just adding a little bit of flexibility to the whole construct of what work is. I think that's the way to
Mhm.
approach it.
Yes, I agree. I feel very fortunate to be in a role where I have that glide path. But I will tell you, for years, I struggled with, because you go to any meeting, conference, et cetera, and the messaging is always how to 10x your business and welcome on stage our $20 bazillion producer. And so you're always reconciling, right? Like, that's not what I want, but this is what's being delivered. And this is not what I ordered, right? I don't want this for lunch, but this is what I keep receiving on the table. And so it took a long time to just say, like, self, this is what you want. You don't have to accept what's being delivered. And it's,
Mhm.
God, it's hard. But
For
First,
founders and owners, I can imagine it's especially hard, right?
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But for those who are in a position, or maybe now is the time, maybe they're at a good juncture where they can think about starting to make those pivots so that they will be in a better position to glide. I couldn't agree more, and we see that so much with clients. That it's more rare for folks to just retire cold turkey and be done. It's much more common for people to at least consider some type of transition, phase out doing consulting, or even substitute teaching at school, something, even if money is not an issue, to give them a little bit of a schedule, some connective tissue, throughout their days and weeks, and of course maintain those social ties also.
I have a close friend who retired just within the past year, and she was an executive at a firm here in Chicago, a large firm that people will know, um, and she did a hard stop. But
Mm.
it's clear to me leading people is still so much a part of her identity. So I
Mm.
want her. I know she just took a break while she had a very demanding job. She took a break where she fully quit from work, and the money really isn't an issue for her. But she needs to lead people in some fashion through her life. I don't think she can step away from that. In fact, I just see it in her, arranging some of our social groups and some of the activities. She's a leader, and she needs to keep that part of her alive, because that is a really special thing, and it's been a huge part of her identity.
Yes, right, exactly. And so she's either found ways to continue doing that, right, kind of in her new chapter. And I was going to say that's exactly what I see with folks who I can't tell you how many women I know, in particular, like in their 70s, that say, I love my life. I love my life. I'm the happiest I've ever been. And that's where I think the word retirement, when we think about the French root word of it, and retirer and withdrawing, well, if we're going to subtract and we're going to take away, like, what are we going to ajouter? What are we going to add to balance that? And I've observed that the folks that are really doing well have found ways to add. They've, taken up new hobbies. They've either found ways to, like the leadership example, I think, which is a great one. Maybe it's not a corporate leadership role anymore, but they're still finding ways to use those skill sets and keep that purpose alive.
Yeah, what a lovely way to think about it, to add in new activities, new skills. Jamie Hopkins calls it rewirement, which I think is a lovely term. Retirement is, it's sort of like, oh, I'm stepping away, I'm stepping back, I'm pulling back. And we don't want to do that at any point in our lives. We want to stay engaged. We want to continue to be connected to other people. That is such a huge dimension of life satisfaction and happiness, these connections. And for a lot of us, those connections come through work. So if you haven't been thoughtful about how you'll replace them post work, you need to think about how you'll put yourself in a situation where you'll have regular ongoing contact with other human beings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. And I love rewirement. I wish we could just totally rebrand retirement.
Me too.
Um, Christine, what's been top of mind for you these days, other than retirement specifically? What's been top of mind in terms of what you see ahead, concerns, or just, thoughts on the landscape that you work in every day?
Sure. So one thing that I have been toiling on for the past, several years has been the topic of long-term care, and how to pay for it, and all of the challenges that go along with long-term care, which is care that is often needed later in life. It's not strictly health care, so it's not covered by standard insurance. It's not covered by Medicare or by your supplemental policy. It's totally outside of traditional insurance products. And as we age, and as longevity, lifespans increase, this need for this type of custodial care to help people feed themselves or shower themselves or make meals or whatever the case might be, the need for that type of care is growing. And as we age, we're more likely to need that type of care. So if we live into our mid 80s or 90s and beyond, we are quite likely to need that type of care. It's very connected with longevity. So, how to pay for it is the elephant in the room. In many of the rooms that I walk into where I'm talking to older adults about what their worries are, that is top of mind for many older adults. This idea of how to pay for long-term care. Medicaid is kind of the insurer of last resort for people who have spent all of their funds, exhausted all of their funds. Medicaid is the biggest payer of long-term care expenses in the US, but there are a couple of important downsides. One I referenced, which is that you would have had to have burned through your funds to be eligible for it. There are strict asset and income limitations to be eligible. And then there are also limitations around where you can receive care. So many people don't like those strictures. At the other extreme would be people who have a lot of financial assets, and there are no kind of one size fits all thresholds. I'd be curious to get your take on like when you think people are safe where they could self-fund long-term care, but that's sort of the other extreme. People who have ample assets may be able to pay these costs out of
Exactly.
pocket. And then in the middle would be some type of insurance product. And there are different variations of the insurance products, but those are sort of the three main categories. And there's just a ton to discuss there. And I would urge people, regardless of where they fall in those three buckets, make sure you have a plan. Make sure you've thought through the aspects of long-term care, because if you live long enough, there's a pretty good chance that you will need some type of long-term care.
Right. And with the irony being the healthier you are,
Yes.
it's right, kind of increases your probability of needing that care. And usually when we're healthy, the last thing that's on our mind is applying for a long-term care policy. So I agree. And I would just encourage folks that if you haven't already had this conversation with your advisor, or if you are a DIY and you haven't already looked into it, at least look into it. And the conversation I like to have with clients is like, let's look into it. It's not cheap. It's not for everyone. It may or may not fit into the plan, but I at least want you to know what your options are. And I never want someone to be in a position where down the road they say, "Oh gosh, I wish I would have known about this. This is something I would have wanted to take advantage of." So gather the information, make an educated decision. I did see something super interesting the other day. I don't know if you've heard about these, but it was referred to as a time bank in Switzerland, where they're modeling other programs in China and Japan, I think other countries in Asia or maybe Europe, where volunteers can earn credits by caring for the elderly,
Hmm.
basically, providing some of this assisted care, and in turn earning credits for their own care down the road.
Amazing. I will have to look that up, Karen, because that was kind of a pet idea of mine. And some friends have been like, that's a crazy idea. But it seems like college students who have a lot of study time or need study time, oftentimes the process of helping older adults, it's not like, and if someone has dementia, it's a different story, but it's not, sort of 24/7, it's episodic. It seemed to me that there could be some union, because college kids definitely need the money and older adults need the companionship and they need someone on site to help them with some of this stuff. So I'm definitely going to look that up. I think that there is something there, and I wish we
Yes.
were there, wish we were closer in this country.
Whatever power you have, whatever fairy dust you have left, left, I think would be well worth sprinkling in that direction to get something done. I just think about, even the companionship issue. So, like you said, not dementia, maybe necessarily, but just for those seniors who are just alone. Maybe they're in a
Right.
facility, but they don't have any family members that are coming to visit them. Just having someone maybe have a meal with them or take them for a walk could be so valuable. And yeah, so I just thought that was so incredible. And I'd never heard of that. And I just came across something last week. So,
Fascinating. I'll look for that. One kind of pushback I would give is that it's very difficult to ask younger people to think about their future elderly selves, that they do not prioritize those older selves at all. It's just human nature.
right.
And we don't even, when we're in our 50s and 60s, we don't even really want to think about ourselves in our 80s. And that's compounded for younger people. So that's one, I
Yes.
think, potential impediment. If you make them wait too long for the payoff of their good works, that there could
Agree.
be a little bit of disconnect.
Yeah. My first thought was, well, give them a tax like deduction or credit or something instead of a coin to use, 50 years down the road. Let's give them
Right.
something now, or maybe a
Some kind of
combination.
home buying credit or something like that. We
Yes,
could
yes,
put
yes,
our heads
yes.
together on this.
Student loan,
Right.
something.
Right.
Yes, all those things. Oh my gosh, Christine, there's so much more that I want to talk about with you. I I know we're gonna, you know what? I just want to go ahead and talk about like one last thing, and then we'll wrap. Which is one of the common challenges I think that a lot of people probably underestimate as a challenge is that if you've done a really good job of saving for retirement, um, you could be one of the people that has the hardest time using those resources, actually spending the money and enjoying it in your retirement, because now you're so hardwired. You've built such a consistent practice of saving and accumulating that it's really, really difficult to actually spend. So I'd love to get your thoughts on this because I know you've addressed it in your work and in your book, in podcasts, etc. So talk to us a little bit about how do you give yourself permission to spend?
It's a huge question, Karen. And it was something that I even hesitated to talk about because we do have a healthy segment of our population who's quite undersaved relative to what they need for retirement. So it's odd to be talking about people underspending in retirement, but it does seem to be a phenomenon with all of the financial advisor and planner friends that I have. They say that the struggle is real with their clients who have, as you said, they've kind of cultivated an identity as a saving person. They've made a habit of it, and they do not want to see their portfolio dwindle from that high water mark that it's probably currently hitting because the market's been relatively good. And so there are a couple of things that people can think about. One, Jamie Hopkins actually mentioned in the book where he talks about doing some trial spending prior to retirement, where, you're buying a car with cash, for example. If you have the funds and you're going to need to spend the money anyway, why not do some trial runs on the big ticket spending to get you a little bit more comfortable
Mm,
invading your portfolio for retirement? So that's one idea. Another comes from David Blanchett, my former colleague at Morningstar, and Michael Finca, who have done research on how people engage in some mental accounting around their retirement cash flows. So they tend to be a little bit more comfortable spending non-portfolio cash flow. So if they have an annuity, like a very basic income producing annuity that they might purchase, they are more comfortable and happier actually spending those income distributions from the annuity. I think it's probably because it's kind of a point in time purchase. You're not having to go back into your portfolio year after year to get the cash. It's just you're going to get that check in the mail, which I think tends to make people a little more comfortable with that spending. And then finally, the idea of reimagining spending to encompass lifetime giving is an important
mm,
component of it as well. That if people don't want to spend on themselves, fine. But if you can think about giving to your loved ones, giving to your charity during your lifetime, think about what a fantastic life experience that would be for you to see your money working during your lifetime versus having people inherit it from you after you're gone. I love the idea of planners having that conversation with their clients. Like, how can we build in some lifetime giving? And how can we wake up to the fact that even smaller gifts earlier can have a big impact? So, something I wrote about was that in the 90s, when my husband and I were buying our first house, my mom and dad gave us a portion of our down payment to kind of buy a house that we could stay in longer than we probably could afford on our own. And that gift, that in hindsight was not a huge sum of money, made all the difference. And we
Absolutely.
never, needed or wanted anything again. But that earlier gift was the impactful one relative to the amount that we eventually inherited from them after they passed away. So lifetime giving, I think, is part of it as well.
Yes, all great points. I'm a big fan of the trial retirement. I had a client who very geniusly, I thought, during the last government shutdown, which was what, 2018, 2019, as a government employee. So she had a forced vacation or whatever you want to call it for a couple weeks. And, looking at that runway that she was on towards retirement, said, I'm going to use this as a trial period. And like, I'm retired, in these weeks. So not just the
Brilliant.
spending, but yeah, how to allocate my, what am I going to do again, besides just go on a cruise or go play golf or pickleball? How am I going to structure my days? What does that look like? Where am I spending money differently? And yeah, that was just such a aha moment for her, but also I just love to see it in action. And I share that very often with others as well.
That's brilliant. We have sabbaticals at Morningstar, and I've done the same over the past couple of sabbaticals, tried to trial run what retirement would feel like. And it's been really instructive for me personally.
Very cool. Christine, I could continue. I would just love to chat with you for hours and hours. I wish that we could do that. But since we're running out of time for today, at least, is there anything else that we didn't get to that you wanted to make sure to address or share with our listeners today?
Well, first, Karen, same. And I love to hear that you're a former Chicagoan. So I expect to get together with you the next time you're here. But in terms of things that we haven't talked about, one I wanted to put on people's radar is it's called the Jonathan Clements Getting Going on Savings Initiative. And it's part of our work at the John C. Bogle Center for Financial Literacy, where we are honoring the legacy of Jonathan Clements, who was a longtime Wall Street Journal columnist and now has a website called Humble Dollar. And Jonathan is just a brilliant individual, and he is dealing with a lethal cancer diagnosis. And we wanted to honor him. So we set up this savings initiative that is going to help young working adults, many of them lower income, get started investing in Roth IRAs. So to be able to get these direct grants to fund their Roth IRAs and kind of get them on the path of understanding the beauty of compounding. So if people are looking for a charitable initiative, and I know that there are many competing for everyone's dollars, this is one to check out because the contributions do directly benefit these young working adults. And people can find the details on the Bogle Center website. Just Google John C. Bogle Center for Financial Literacy, and you'll see the Clements Initiative right there.
Okay, great. We will be sure to include that in the show notes.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Christine, thanks so much for joining us. And I will definitely make sure we catch up the next time I'm in Chicago.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thanks again for listening. Please follow us on Spotify if you're not already, so you don't miss any future episodes. We'd also love for you to rate the show while you're there. Connect with us on social. Search Karen Coyne CFP on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. If you have feedback or if we can be of service in any way, please let us know. And now for the standard disclosures. Opinions expressed are those of Karen Coyne and not those of Raymond James Financial Services or Raymond James. Securities offered through Raymond James Financial Services Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors, Incorporated. Clarity Planning is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services. Karen Coyne Financial Advisors, located at 12920 Connemara Drive, Suite 202, Hagerstown, Maryland, 21742. Phone 301-739-7002.